willing to gamble anytime, anywhere, and with anyone.
I tried to live that life of being the most perfect person, but I had to come to my senses. Hey, I'm just as human as anyone else.
Certain people, and we be playing a couple $100 a hole, nothing but, and then he be playing some guy for like 100.
Of course, Michael always had a little game going with everyone. I ended up shooting a 78 and beat him one day.
It's exciting to win money.
The check was already in the evidence bag. Federal agents had seized it weeks earlier as part of a drug and money laundering investigation. A cashier's check, $57,000, signed by Michael Jordan, made out to a convicted felon named James Bouler. When Jordan first explained it, he called it a loan money for a driving range. Then prosecutors put him on the witness stand in 1992. And the greatest basketball player on earth looked at the courtroom and admitted he had lied. It was gambling losses, golf debt, paid to a man whose phone had been wiretapped by federal agents. That is where friendly competition between legends actually goes when no one is watching. Because for every charity match and televised handshake, some of the most famous competitors in the history of sports were carrying private wagers that none of them could control. Wagers that grew until they hit federal courtrooms, criminal convictions. Tell all books and careers that never fully recovered. What started as ego and boredom and the kind of arrogance that comes from being the best in the world at something turned into a record of consequences. Their highlight reels were never designed to show. These are 5 secret bets between legends that got completely out of hand. At number 5, Charles Barkley and the private money culture running through the NBA's elite. Charles Barkley never hit it. That was the problem. For years, the Hall of Famer treated Las Vegas like a second home, not for entertainment, not for spectacle, but for blackjack at $25,000 a hand, with one stated and obsessive goal: leave with $1 million, or leave with nothing. When he was up $300,000, friends begged him to cash out. When he was up $600,000, they begged harder. Barkley's answer never changed. They were not leaving until the number hit $1 million. He hit that million roughly 7 times. He lost $1 million about 25 times. Do the math. Barkley has admitted to losing somewhere between $10 and $25 million over the course of his gambling life, against roughly $40 million in NBA salary and another $40 in endorsements. One night, he dropped $2.5 million in 6 hours of blackjack. In 2008, Wynn Las Vegas sued him for $400,000 in unpaid markers. He paid, he kept going. But Barkley was not alone in this. He was part of something bigger, a private money culture that ran through the highest levels of professional basketball, invisible to cameras and entirely off the record. On the golf course with Michael Jordan, $100,000 Nassau's were standard. Barkley once described lining up a $200 putt when Jordan calmly told him to pick his ball up, because Jordan's competing putt was worth $300,000. Barkley stepped aside without a word. That single detail tells you what kind of scale these men were operating at behind closed doors. What looked like 2 Hall of Famers clowning around on a fairway was, in practice, a money spiral that quietly consumed career earnings and still got called affordable by the people who were losing it. Barkley eventually admitted it himself, a stupid habit he could not fully put down. At number 4, Operation Slapshot, and how one illegal betting ring pulled Wayne Gretzky's world into a police investigation. February 2006. The NHL was barely out of a year-long lockout and still working to prove the league mattered. Then New Jersey State Police announced an investigation with a code name that sounded invented: Operation Slapshot. At the center was Rick Tockey, assistant coach of the Phoenix Coyotes, former NHL enforcer, and according to prosecutors, a 50-50 partner in an illegal nationwide sports betting ring run alongside a suspended state trooper named James Harney. The ring moved serious volume. Investigators pointed toward possible organized crime connections. Names began leaking: active players, coaches, staff members, Jeremy Roenick, Travis Green. And then the name that stopped every sports desk in North America: Janet Jones, wife of Wayne Gretzky, who was coaching those same Coyotes that season. Gretzky was never charged, Jones was never charged, but wiretaps placed the greatest hockey player alive at the edge of a felony gambling operation involving his own household. Tocchet pleaded guilty to conspiracy and promoting gambling, received 2 years probation, and was removed from coaching before eventually returning to the league years later. Harney went to prison. This was not a story about a celebrity placing a Super Bowl bet. This was a police operation with wiretaps a suspended trooper, and criminal pleas, with the most iconic name in the sport attached through proximity alone. The wagers themselves were almost beside the point by the time it was done. The point was how fast guys taking action inside a legend's inner circle turned into felony exposure and headlines the league spent years trying to move past. At number 3, Phil Mickelson and Billy Walters, and the billion-dollar betting relationship that ended in federal prison. Phil Mickelson is a 6-time major champion and one of the most recognized figures in professional golf. Billy Walters is one of the most feared professional sports bettors in American history, a man whose action Las Vegas bookmakers genuinely dreaded. For years, their relationship operated like a private empire built on shared information and mutual trust. According to Walters' later accounts, Mickelson wagered more than $1 billion over 3 decades of gambling and lost close to $100 million. Walters claimed Mickelson attempted to bet on the Ryder Cup while actively competing in it, a line virtually no legitimate book would accept from a player inside the event. Whether every figure was exact almost doesn't matter. The scale alone tells you what kind of hole Mickelson was carrying. Then came Dean Foods, and the federal case that followed destroyed everything. In 2012, Mickelson owed Walters gambling money. Walters pushed him toward Dean Foods stock. Mickelson, who barely traded equities, suddenly opened a $2.4 million position across 3 separate accounts. Days later, a corporate spin-off announcement drove the stock up roughly 40%. Mickelson sold, clearing just over $931,000 in profit, and used the proceeds to help pay down his gambling debt. Federal prosecutors and the SEC dismantled the network. Walters was convicted on insider trading, conspiracy, and wire fraud charges, sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, and fined $10 million. Mickelson was not criminally charged, but named as a relief defendant. He agreed to return his profits plus interest over $1 million without admitting wrongdoing. A golf legend and a gambling legend. Private debts, stock tips, and a federal conviction. That is not a fun money game story. That is a secret betting relationship that grew until it became a securities scandal and permanently attached itself to one of the cleanest public images in professional sports. At number 2, Michael Jordan and Slim Bouler, the check that put the greatest player alive on a witness stand. Everyone knows Michael Jordan competes at everything. Fewer people remember how dark that impulse became in the early 1990s. Jordan's private golf and card circle included James Bouler, known as Slim, a golf hustler who, according to federal prosecutors, was also connected to cocaine money laundering. Over several years, they played high-stakes golf dozens of times. After a 5-day stretch at Hilton Head built around golf and poker, Jordan owed Bouler $57,000. He settled the debt with a cashier's check. Federal agents seized it. Bouler was already under surveillance. The check became evidence in a federal drug case, and when prosecutors first asked Jordan about it, he said it was a loan, money for Bouler to build a driving range. Then he was called to testify under oath in 1992. He admitted the truth. It was gambling losses. He said he had lied earlier because he was embarrassed. The NBA investigated and cleared him of the accusation that mattered most to the league, betting on basketball. But nothing erased what had happened in open court. The greatest player on earth had written a 5-figure check to a man tied to cocaine trafficking, then misled investigators about what it was for, and only corrected the record from a witness stand during a federal trial. And it still was not the worst of it. At number 1, Michael Jordan and Richard Esquinas, the alleged $1.25 million golf debt that exploded in public during a championship run. If Slim Bouler was the warning, Richard Esquinas was the full detonation. Esquinas was a San Diego businessman who played more than 100 rounds of golf with Jordan over several years. In 1993, in the middle of Chicago's title run, in the weeks after Jordan's father was murdered, Esquinas self-published a book with a title designed to be impossible to look away from: Michael and Me, Our Gambling Addiction, My Cry for Help. His claim was specific and staggering. During a 10-day golf binge that peaked at Aviara Golf Course on September 20th, 1991, Jordan had lost $1,252,000 to him. Esquinas said they negotiated the figure down to $300,000. He said Jordan had only paid roughly $200,000 of that. And then during the NBA playoffs, he sat across from Bob Costas on national television and held up Jordan's actual checks. Jordan publicly confirmed a $300,000 settlement figure, but disputed the larger debt narrative. Hard documentation for the full 1.25 million was never definitively established. Esquinas later described being frightened by Jordan's reaction to seeing the full number on paper, claiming Jordan told him he might as well be shot as write a check for that amount. Whether Esquinas' accounting was exact to the dollar barely mattered by that point. The scandal landed on top of Bouler, on top of $100,000 golf Nassau's, on top of a league investigation and federal testimony that had already happened. Conspiracy theories followed fast, that gambling pressure, gambling debts, and gambling exhaustion had driven the greatest player alive into a sudden baseball career. Jordan denied betting on basketball and always framed the golf losses as competing against himself. The league never suspended him. History still gave him every crown. But the damage was real and it was permanent. The GOAT's private scorecard with golf hustlers, businessmen, and federal witnesses stopped being a secret. It became a national story about competitive greatness turned inward, unregulated and entirely out of control. And the scoreboard that version of Michael Jordan was running had nothing to do with the finals. That is the thread running through all 5 of these stories. Barkley burning through $2.5 million in a single night and calling it a habit he could not kill. Tocic's ring dragging hockey royalty into a police wiretap. Mickelson's golf debts bleeding directly into a federal insider trading conviction. Jordan writing checks to a man connected to drug trafficking, lying about it under oath, and then watching a private debt go public on national television during a championship. None of these were small, none of them stayed contained, and none of them stayed secret. Because when legends compete without an off switch, the house they are playing against is not always the casino. Sometimes it is a federal courtroom. Sometimes it is a book sitting on a shelf with their name in the title, published while the series is still being played. And sometimes it is a reputation intact for decades under the lights that finally cracks in the one place no camera ever followed them.